A while ago, I was sitting on the banks of the Snake River in Idaho Falls here, watching the water flow by. What came to me was a line from the poem, The Ancient Mariner. And it says, "Water, water everywhere, nor a drop to drink." I was thinking of that because I had just come from a meeting with people talking about Idaho Falls water supply and the fact that we may be running out of water for new development and use. And I was thinking about that as a hydrologist when, in fact, I know that where I was standing, we're over the eastern Snake River Plain aquifer, and it holds billions of acre-feet of water. And in front of me was the Snake River, which brings billions of gallons of water past Idaho Falls every day on average. And I was thinking about this because it seemed to me that although Colville in his poem was talking about a person that was out in a boat adrift in the ocean and he was dying of thirst but couldn't access water, here we are, billions of gallons of water in the river, billions of acre feet in the aquifer, and we can't use a lot of that. Essentially, Idaho Falls has a small slice of that aquifer that they can use, the water rights. We can't take a drop out of the river. We have no rights to that, even though it's rolling by us. So water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So it's interesting to me that we have any water issues at all on Earth, because if you think about it, we're covered with water. 71% of the globe is covered with water. But 93% or 97% of that water is actually water in our oceans and the seas. It's salt water. Only 3% is water that we can actually use readily and easily for our needs. So this here is a t-shirt I got from what claims to be the most sustainable brewery in America. And this is in Portland. This is a brewery that actually takes their water from the Portland sewage treatment plant. It's the discharge. And I've drank that. But the point of this is what they say on the t-shirt is two-part. One is the water that we have here is the same water we've been drinking since the days of the dinosaurs and even before. The water on Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. So when you hear people talk about we're running out of water, we're not running out of water, we're just not using it well. The other part that they talk to is the fact that that water is always being recycled. We use it, we recycle it, we use it, we recycle it. It doesn't break down, it just keeps flowing through the system. So if we look, how do we get water? How do we get fresh water? Well, all water on land essentially starts from the ocean, and it comes and it falls as precipitation on land. And if we look here, the vast majority of the water we get here in the continental United States is from the east. It's the humid areas where most water falls, and then there's a strip between the Cascade Mountains and the Pacific Ocean. And in between those two strips is what we call the arid West. So if we look at Idaho specifically, we see we have a humid north in the green, and we have an arid south in the brown. We live in that arid part. So in the arid, or in the humid east, what we have is plenty of water. And by that I mean that we can grow crops out there, and we can do that without having to irrigate. And water managers out there, what they have to do is figure out how to take too much water from a place and move it away. So they have ditches that move water away from them. Here in the arid West, we can't grow crops without irrigation, and we have managers that what they're trying to do is find scarce water resources and bring them to the areas where we need them. So the first 20 years of my career as a water person, a water manager and a water scientist, I spent using all of the science that I was taught, trying to figure out how to best protect and use that water. And I always had faith in that science, and I always had faith in the policies and the laws that we were trying to implement. Until one day, I read a court ruling on a water rights dispute in Oregon that was written by the Ninth Circuit Court. What that said was, Scientists have long delighted in pointing out to lawyers that all waters are interrelated in one continuous hydrologic cycle. As a result, it's become fashionable to argue that an effective legal regime should govern all forms and uses of water in a consistent and uniform manner. The law is otherwise. That really struck me as a scientist and as a manager, that the law is otherwise. Here we live in the United States, a supposedly advanced society, and we're saying that we understand the water system. What that statement that they give, it's highfalutin, but it says that the scientists understand the natural laws and they understand the scientific principles to manage water resources, and that we can do it in an integrated manner. For a long time, scientists and others have advocated finding a more uniform, a more holistic way of managing. But the law says otherwise. So as I thought about that, I had an epiphany. It's like, what do we mean? I just can't grasp it as a scientist that we are not following the laws and the principles that govern water. So I started a quest, and that quest was to look for a better, more holistic, integrated way of managing water. And I looked around the world, and what I came up with is integrated water resources management. Not practiced here in the United States, it's practiced in a small number of countries around the world. It's a choice they're making to redo their water laws for the most part to try to integrate it more. And integrated water resources management is a process that's essentially promoting the integration of water resources with land resources, with other associated resources such as taking care of the fish and wildlife. So what I wanted to do is say, okay, we have these systems out here, how do we use them? Well, I took a look at them, and what happened was I looked and I saw that each of these programs would take a little piece and they would integrate a little piece of something and a few things together. But I never found anything comprehensive. So what I did was I took it upon myself and built a conceptual model of what I thought integrated water resources management should be. And so this is it. I know it looks messy. I know it looks like, it looks complicated, and water resources management is both of those things. But if you'll stick with me, I'll try to go back and walk through this and see if we can all understand what integrated water resources management's about. So first, let me take and show you, these are the 7 major parts that I think are really critical to an integrated water resources management program. And if we strip away the different noise in the back, the different strands of connection and all that, this is what we have here. And if you look, we have 3 parts in blue, and those are the parts that are actually water related. And we have 4 parts in red, and what those are the things that constrain our water use or water availability. So let's walk through this. Let's walk through this system. So the top was hydrologic inputs and outputs. Those are what we informally in the water world call goes-ins and goes-outs. It's what goes in the system, what comes out of the system, what goes out of the system. Here we are in eastern Idaho. Idaho Falls, you can see on the right. The blue is the Snake River Plain, underlain by the eastern Snake River Plain aquifer. And so where do we get our water? Well, we get our water from precipitation directly on the plain. We get water from precipitation on the mountains that surround us. You can see the rivers and streams that we all know, the Big Lost and the Little Lost and the Portneuf and the Raft. And we get them from the waters flowing down either through the streams or their aquifers onto the plain. So we also have things like the Teton River Basin, and the Teton is connected to the Henry's Fork and then comes to us. And more importantly, we have the South Fork of the Snake, which brings water to us from the upper Snake River Basin and all of the area along the eastern Idaho, western Wyoming border and the Teton Mountains. So all of that comes down and it flows down to the eastern Snake River Plain, and it can either drop into the aquifer or it can go down the river. Many of us know that the river comes in the north and goes down to the southwest. And the aquifer flows the same direction, generally from the northeast to the southwest. And they both flow down there, and eventually when we get down near Hagerman, we have the world-famous Thousand Springs area where our entire aquifer naturally dumps into the Snake River again. And both of those join up, and then they go out past King Hill and out of the eastern Snake River Plain. Or goes in, or goes out. So that brings us water to use for whatever purposes we need or desire. So how much do we get, and what do we use it for? Well, Idaho uses about 18 billion gallons of water a day. For a state of about 1.25 million, 1.5 million, we have the third largest use of water in the United States behind California and Texas. So what do we use that water for? Well, we use it for all the things we all know. We use it in our houses for domestic purposes. We use it for commercial and industrial purposes. We generate electricity. We do all kinds of things. We navigate with it. But most importantly, in Idaho, the vast majority of it is used for irrigation purposes. 86% of all the water that is used in Idaho on a daily basis is used for irrigation. That's on average, because obviously we don't irrigate in the winter. So that's an average number. That's the vast majority of our water. That's why many times when we talk about problems with water here in Idaho Falls, we know about a lot of water being used. That's where it's being used. That's where we're competing against. Those are the waters we have to use. What are the constraints on those waters? What keeps us from using them or using them more effectively? Well, we have physical constraints. And those physical constraints are quantity, quality, timing, and place. Those are the things that water resources managers manage most of the time. If you think about it, quantity, if we have too much, we have a flood. If we have too little, we have a drought. For quality, we could use water coming straight out of the ground or wherever we get it. We can use it directly, or we could have to treat it, which in many cases is quite costly. And it may be that it's just so bad that we cannot use it. There's waters we just don't use because, especially economically, it's not worth trying to treat it. Timing, when you think about it, if water comes right when you need it, then you're fine, but what happens when it doesn't come? And how much rain do we get in August when you need it on your garden? So if it's not right when we need it, then we gotta either store it, and that usually happens naturally up in the snowpack of our mountains or in the aquifer, or it can happen by what we do. And that's building reservoirs and tanks and such. And place, it can either come right to our place where we need it, or if it doesn't, then we have to move to it, or we move it to us. Those are our choices. Social economic constraints. Really what it boils down to is people, politics, and money. That's what we have to work with social economically in general. That's generalizing. People, that's you and me. We're the people. We, the people, are the ones that should be deciding what we do or don't do with our water resources. And we should be deciding what we want to pay or not pay relative to developing and managing our water resources. Politicians, those are the people that we elect. And we elect them to be giving some leadership, and we elect them to make the policies and laws that regulate our water resources. And money, that's what keeps our community going and builds the projects and pays the people to do the work for us. Legal constraints. We have policies, we have laws, we have compacts and treaties. Those are the major tools we work with. And if you think about it, Idaho, especially in the south, it's water short, always has been. So since the very beginning, we have actually had water law embedded into our Constitution. It's considered that important to us. And in policies, we have policies all the way from the federal level to the state level to the local level. We have volumes of those policies and laws that we have to live to. Here again, we're a state that we need to get water to where we want it and need it. So we have a very robust set of policies for water allocation. How do we get and use water? It's really well designed, but it's really well designed to take water out of rivers and aquifers and get it on the land so we can use it for economic purposes. We also have policies and laws like water quality. which essentially is dictated to us by the federal government. They set the rules and we're required to follow them, and that's okay. And then there's just a myriad of other policies that are related. The related things are things like things that control mining and control timber harvesting and other things that could eventually impact the water quality or quantity in our state. Here in eastern Idaho, we only have one water compact. Water compacts are agreements between states. And what we have is one compact with Wyoming that says, essentially, we in eastern Idaho get first use. We have senior priority on some of their water rights. We don't have any treaties here that really affect us here, though. Environmental constraints. So for environmental constraints, we have ecosystems and ecosystem services. And that's just the scientist's way of saying ecosystems are just the natural resources that we have out there. Ecosystem services are those things out there in the environment that we as humans use for our sustenance, to maintain us, for our survival, and for our benefit. And with those ecosystems, those are the things like the plants and the animals and the fish that we love to go out and catch and shoot or harvest. It's the places that we like to go to hike and bike and enjoy the scenery. All of those are part of the ecosystems. The flip side of that is the ecosystem services, which really, it's just the other side. We're using the services from those ecosystems. So everything we do that's for us, we're taking some from those ecosystems. When you think about it, when we go out there and we build a city or build a house out on the country, essentially what we're doing is eating up a little bit of those ecosystems. Those are all the major parts of integrated water resources management. We have our three parts that are water aspects and those constraints. And what we need to do is figure out scientifically all of those water parts. And from a policy perspective, we have to think about what are all those constraints, the non-physical constraints, the ones that are social economics and laws and such. And we got to figure out how to meld them and blend them so they work together to maximize our availability and use of water. After I went through all of this, learned what I could about integrated water resources management, I went back and I sat at the same place that I started in the Snake River, on the bank of the Snake River in Idaho Falls. And I thought, so what? Okay, what about it? What are we going to do? What can I do? And I thought, let's think big about this. Don't think about just what's there. What can we do? And I thought, if I was the benevolent dictator of Idaho for the day, what would I do? Well, of course, I would require integrated water resources management. And what if the proverbial genie stopped by and said, you get 3 wishes? What would they be for water in Idaho? I thought through that long and hard, and here's the 3 things that I would wish from Idaho to change their policies to do to improve our water resources. Number 1, I'd require that we look at our atmospheric water, our surface water, and our groundwater resources as a combined resource, as a single source of water, treat them that way and manage them that way. That's really the key of integrated water resources management. The second part that I would do is I would require that we took our water allocation laws and really blended them properly, what I consider properly, with our environmental laws, so that we could get a more balanced and sustainable approach to meeting both the needs of humans and the environment. Third, I would require that we quantify how much water it takes to meet those sustainability goals, both for humans and for animals. And from those, what I would require is that whenever we take enough water out of the system that we're compromising that sustainability, that we quit issuing water rights. And what would you do then? So you don't do new water rights, you'd look at water markets and water trading programs, water banks. So within the basin or the watershed that you would be managing for all of those sustainabilities that you were working towards. So those would be my 3 wishes from that genie. What I recall from my early professional life was a very wise man in water resources here in Idaho. And he told me, he said, Jerry, he said, Idaho water law was written in the 19th and 20th century with the intent of taking water and getting it out of our aquifers and our streams and getting them onto the ground for economic purposes. He said, your generation, when you take over, you're going to have to decide what's important to you. And I'm thinking that here in the 21st century, that some of the laws that we have may need to be reworked a little bit. And hopefully they'll be reworked pretty soon. Because what I would hate to think, now that I'm retired, is sometime in the next decade or so, that some other young water resources professional is going to have to sit on the banks of the Snake River watching water flow by, thinking, water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink.